All right, welcome back to the Picking Your Brain podcast, where we interview people doing ministry at a high level. And on today's episode, we have Andrew Thompson. What's up, Andrew?
And not too much. Honored to be here. Excited.
Man, I fired up to have you on. We met. It's been 4 years. It's during COVID or right at COVID, but we met at a D now for Temple Baptist Church called Princess and Warrior Weekend. And I'm actually, little spoiler alert, John's going to come on in a few weeks. I'm excited for that. For anybody that knows John Nugent, that'll be good. But we met there. We really spent most of the weekend just kind of visiting, getting to know each other. Really enjoyed getting to know you, and so I'm excited to get to have you on today.
Yeah. Pumped to be here. Yeah, that was longer ago than I think I realized. Now that I'm thinking about it.
We're getting old, Andrew. We're getting old.
I know. I hate it.
So if you're one of those followers that listen every week, this is the third week in a row that I've had an Andrew. So I don't know what's going on. We've had Andrew Fork, Andrew Barber, now Andrew Thompson. So I'm excited about that. That's fun. But Andrew, if anybody may not know who you are, let them know where you're serving and what God has you doing right now.
Yeah, well, so I'm actually in week one of a new position. I'm currently in Clarksville, Tennessee, as a campus pastor at Living Hope Clarksville. So I'm at one of three campuses in the city of Clarksville. But like I said, I haven't even had a Sunday yet, so still really fresh. I imagine most of the substance of our conversation today is going to be about my previous church, which is Crosspoint Community Church in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I was there for 5 years, as of June 1 of this, last month. So, 5 years in student ministry, dabbled in college ministry, was brought on as an associate actually this year there. So I've done a bunch of different things there, but was there primarily as the student pastor. Me and my wife are in Clarksville, Tennessee now. So that's been the last 6 years of my life. That's me in a nutshell.
Is it fun saying me and my wife? I know that's still relatively new.
It is still very fresh. Yeah, so March 2nd of just 4 months ago we got married. So yeah, it still feels very strange.
That's got to be I would say that's got to be a whirlwind. Not only starting this new relationship, kind of just marriage, but now you're moving to a whole new state. And that's really cool.
Oh yeah. It's been an adventure. Been good.
Well, Andrew, let's hop into some of the questions. The format of the podcast is super simple. I'm just going to ask you a few questions about you as a minister and how you think through ministry so we can learn from you today. And the first question, I said it on the last episode, is becoming one of my favorites. I love this is like talking youth ministry shop together or just ministry shop. So how do you prep your sermons? Like, what does that sermon prep look like? What resources do you use? How much time do you spend as you're preparing? What does that timeline maybe look like? And then what do you take with you to the pulpit? What's sitting there that you're using as you're giving God's word?
Yeah. So right off the bat, one of the things that I feel like I've realized as I've gotten a lot of opportunities on Sunday morning to preach, and now obviously in my new role, I'll be preaching every Sunday, is the preaching on Wednesday night is like, I think, way more difficult from a prep standpoint than preaching on Sunday morning. Because it's difficult to feel like you can really start focusing on Wednesday until you've gotten through Sunday. Whereas usually your week when you're preaching on Sundays is like Monday morning, it's like recap and then thinking about the next Sunday. So you got all week. But I would say it's in different seasons. It changed. I think I definitely kind of grew. We were talking about that, before we hopped on the recording. It's one of those things that when you're first starting out, learning how to get into the rhythm of preaching every single Wednesday night, it can be pretty daunting to figure out the best way to do it. Early on, I felt a lot of pressure, I feel like, to do all kinds of things, like, break out the commentaries and spend a long time, looking at them, make sure that I have like my 3 points, going through all the processes. I've maybe got some preacher friends that might listen to this that might really hate some of my answer to this question. But, like coming out of seminary classes and just trying to make sure that I checked all the boxes. It was writing a sermon brief every single time, checking all my work. As when I think back over the last couple years, when I think I kind of really hit the stride that I would maintain, if I was still in student ministry today, that I kind of kept with is, I have a guy that we brought on as a youth ministry associate at the beginning of this last year, but had been working as an intern with me for several years, we'd gotten into the pattern over the last year of sitting down and just kind of 30,000 foot planning
Mm-hmm.
the direction of a series. And I was
Yeah.
giving him reps. You know, he was preaching for me on Wednesday nights because he was called a ministry, and was just kind of trying to walk with him through that. But we would plan sermon series together, and I think that's a cheat code to have somebody to be able to sit down with and just be able to kind of
Mm-hmm.
talk through holistically. Maybe that's a pastor,
Yeah.
maybe that's an intern, maybe that's something, to just be able to kind of like sharpen each other on the direction you're going in, figure out the texts that you're going to be going through for each week. And we didn't do complicated series. This
Yeah.
like we're looking at the parables. The last
Mm-hmm.
series that we did was we were going to take a look at the individual encounters that Jesus had throughout the Gospels, with people, like one-on-one conversation
Yeah.
that he had with people. And so we just kind of like both came in, sat down, scheduled out all the weeks that we were going to be doing the series. And my rhythm was really like, in Mondays, I'm trying to spend my time figuring out one big idea. And
Mm-hmm.
and what I kind of would say I grew into is I think that one big idea for preaching to students is I don't know, I think that beats out having 6 or 7 points most of the time.
For sure. Yeah.
If you got one big idea that you want to communicate, and then like I would try to get my outline as quickly as possible. Where I needed to pull in
Yeah.
resources, I pulled them in. I didn't have like a go to or a favorite necessarily.
Yeah.
But like if I need to do a little bit of background study, I'd pull out one of the commentaries that I had, or I'd go borrow one from my pastor's office.
Yeah.
And I found that just kind of like sitting on one big idea and like getting into the text and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
letting I did some research and studied a little bit. Like I can't regurgitate any of it, but like the subconscious
Yeah.
mind and its ability to kind of come up with like creative ways of expressing
Mm-hmm.
things. Like the earliest that you can get kind of the idea of where you want to go in your head, the
Mm-hmm.
longer you have to just kind of think about it as you drive, think about it as you
Yes.
as you are just kind of going through the motions of your day. And I just really tried to make sure that I had my one big idea early on. And then on Tuesday afternoon, I'd try to like really tack out the rest of my outline, beef it up where I needed
Mm-hmm.
to. And then I'd just come in on Wednesday and I'd spend some Wednesdays are a weird day. Like I would
Yeah.
imagine you feel the same. Like it feels like most of your day you're just waiting for kids to start showing up. So
Yeah.
I try to run through my sermon in the youth room on Wednesday
Yeah.
afternoon, just kind of get my head around it, be in the space, be able to pray over the room. And then kids would come in and I was ready. Like I would take my iPad into the pulpit because that's what I took all my notes on. And
Yeah.
some weeks I'd have like 3 bullet points on it. Other weeks I'd have like a novel. It just
Yeah.
really like I never developed like a. It just kind of depended on the week for me.
Okay. That's
As
interesting.
far as time, uh, yeah, I remember sitting in my preaching class at New Orleans, and my professor said something like, 25 hours of your week, with sermon prep. I'm like, you can't do
Oh,
that as a youth pastor preaching on Wednesday night.
no,
I mean,
no.
probably time at my desk behind my computer typing, and doing research, maybe a couple hours a week, maybe 3 or 4 when it was a really
Yeah.
intensive series or topic, which that did happen. I certainly like
Yeah.
was if depending on the content, you might be all over the map for how much prep you really need to do. But man, if I got my one big idea, it was a lot of hours of me thinking about it and just kind of chewing on it,
Yeah.
and talking to other people about it, and so yeah, like I would just encourage a young guy getting used to the preaching every single week, man. Find what worked for you. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to be exactly like anybody else,
Yeah.
and just you'll find your own unique voice and really think about how do I make this text or this idea palatable to my students. I know my students better than anybody else. I know what they're going
Mhm.
through. I know what they're facing. How do I make this feel real to them?
Yeah.
Obviously the Spirit of God is at work in everything. But man, if I can figure out a way to say this that like really resonates with a teenager that goes to the high
Yeah.
schools that I know are in our area, how do I inspire them to live this out in their context? And how do I challenge them? Like lean in on student, like challenge them.
Yeah.
I never pulled any punches, and and really kind of like calling out things that I knew our students were probably facing or going through.
Yeah.
Try to give a name to it and tell them why this addresses that exactly. That's a lot of different things,
Yeah,
but
no, that's good. So two questions I have. The first one is when you're talking about y'all would sit down, you and the intern associate would sit down and maybe plan out a sermon series. Was that like would you plan out the next 4 weeks, the next 8 weeks? What would that process look
typically we went series by series. Was
like?
the prep we leaned in like we started doing longer series,
Yeah.
especially over the last 6 months or so. Um, we would really like when we were closed. I'd try to run a series until we had some sort of break.
Yeah,
If
okay.
that
That makes
was
sense.
like, hey, we're gonna start a new series after their spring break. So
Right.
we got 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, here's kind of some thoughts that I've had about what direction we can go in, and we would kind of like arrive somewhere, and then we'd be like, all right, so how does this fit across 6 weeks? If
Mm-hmm.
it's encounters with Jesus, you can be like individual encounters. We had as many as we wanted to pick from, and so then it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of like, man, like, are there ones that really stick out to you in this moment that like you could get really excited about teaching,
Mm-hmm.
or that the Lord has used in your life? And then we just kind of like plugged them into the calendar slots, and then once spring break got there, and we were done with that series, we'd already kind of have an idea of maybe where we wanted to go next. And we just sit down and we forecast the rest of them. And there's
Yeah.
some awesome resources. I used Download Youth Ministry early on to like help me
Yeah.
figure out. I used some YM360 stuff to help me figure out. There's nothing wrong with. I mean, I don't know what to preach on. I'm gonna go find somebody else's series, and I'm gonna make it my
Yeah.
own.
For sure.
That's an awesome thing to do as well. Or if I saw other youth pastors doing something, I was like, man, I think that'd work for our students really well.
Yeah.
Just file that away. I'm gonna try to do that, later this year, maybe.
So I hope nobody from Download Youth Ministry watches this, but I've done similar stuff where like I want to talk about the Holy Spirit, but like man, I don't know what direction I kind of want to go. I just type in Holy Spirit, it pulls up sermon series, and it has a little, hey, this is through Ezekiel 4, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna look in Ezekiel 4, and I
Right,
just do
right,
my own
right.
thing. I was like, cool,
Yeah,
that'll be
yeah,
good. So hopefully they don't take that away. That's nice. I have bought series before and then look through more like, man, I need an illustration about, let me see if they got any illustrations. And so Download Youth Ministry is phenomenal. If you for some reason
yep,
haven't found it and you're listening, that's great. One more thing, you said and I love this, that you give your intern associate, you gave him reps for
yep.
preaching. Because you saw a call of ministry on his life. He's on staff with y'all, giving him reps, man, giving up the pulpit and in for the student ministry, I think is big.
Yep,
Letting those
absolutely.
people that feel a call get those reps underneath your leadership is so big. And
Mhm.
so, like, how did you prepare him maybe for his first few sermons? What information did you give him? How did you help him?
Yeah. So I really just encouraged him to bring me what he had. So
Yeah,
we would talk through high level like what we were the direction he was going in, and then we would. The thing is, I never wanted him to preach my message on the
yeah,
text. Like I wanted him to preach his own, and so we would usually sit down on Thursday after, like I do Wednesday night, the night before he was up the next Wednesday. We'd sit down on Thursday and we just kind of like, hey, high level, what are you thinking? Like, I don't expect you to have everything figured out yet.
yeah,
Let's just
yeah,
talk about the text together. Like you and me, let's just talk about the text together. And you bring your notepad and we would just spend some time talking about it. And he would leave there with like an idea of what direction he
hmm,
was going in, and then we would try to sit down on Tuesday, just by nature of like him being part time. Like weren't able to sit down with him on Monday. There were times when he would send me stuff on Monday afternoon that he'd been working on, so we'd go into Tuesday afternoon meeting together, and we'd really try to just tack it out, like what he was going to communicate.
yeah,
And then I just try to coach on the back end. I had no expectations that he was going to go up there and crush it, but he improved, a lot over time. But like the next day on Thursday after he'd preach, I'd try to sit down with him and like, hey, dude, how do you think last night went?
yeah,
And I'd just give him some feedback, thoughts, and an encouragement, and I'd really try to like focus primarily on the things that I thought that he did really really well. Like, hey, like
yeah,
I think your opening was phenomenal. I think you landed the plane beautifully. I think this point was really good. And then I'd come in and be like, but here's where I think you might have lost the room just a little bit, just from where I sat. Like that probably didn't work as well. Like probably don't need to spend as much time on something like that. And all those are just things that, and I told him, like, what you need more than anything is not me to tell you these things as much as it is you just need more reps. Like
Yeah,
you're getting used to this. Don't hold yourself to be me up there,
for
and
sure. For sure.
he grew tremendously as a communicator over the last year and a half,
That's cool.
just through getting opportunities. Um,
Hmm. Well, awesome. Well, let's transition to number two,
sure.
because it kind of somewhat similar. Is so, what did you feel you did well in your time in student ministry? That may be helping
Yeah,
the intern, grow. What are some stuff that or
yeah.
maybe one or two things that you're like, man, this is really good. And then what's some stuff that you thought, man, I wish if I could go back, I would do this slightly different. What would those
Yeah,
be?
yeah. So as far as like things I feel like I did well, yeah, that's a tough list because almost anything you look at, you can look at somebody else doing it better. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's just as an encouragement to anybody out there. Um, Strengths of mine that I felt like we did a good job at our big events.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Whether that was our fall retreats, I thought our fall retreats were amazing. I think that we'll talk about it more here in a little bit. I think, but our Serve One is another event
Mhm.
that we did that um, I think was really really good. And I do think that one of the strengths that I had as a student pastor was my ability to just authentically communicate.
Yeah.
I by no stretch think that I'm the best communicator in the world, but like like I do think that it was something that the Lord really kind of used me to do.
Hmm.
Um, my weaknesses we could talk a lot more about, or things that I wish I'd done differently. One of the things that like I really hated that I was like that was always on the top of my mind anytime this kind of question would come up was parent ministry. And that is
Yeah.
just like that's got to be the most difficult part of student ministry because everywhere you go, everybody you listen to, they tell you that in our world today, your time is better spent investing in parents than anything else. But it also happens to be the most difficult thing to figure out how to do well.
Yeah.
We actually stole from you like the YPOs, youth ministry, or parents night, youth parents only.
Yeah. Yeah.
We started doing that just as like a connection point, but never really figured out how to really bring parents into the ministry in a way that I felt like was really effective. And part of that is because that's only parent ministry is a holistic church approach. Like
Yep.
you have to from the top down be doing everything. And so me and my pastor were really tossing around ideas, but never really got anywhere with like making genuine progress. And there's a million different reasons for that, but that's one of the things that I think I did not do as well. um, Another thing that I didn't think that I did particularly well was I never figured out the sweet spot for like groups, discipleship groups for our
Yeah. Yeah.
students. We
Hmm.
tried a bunch of different things. I thought our Wednesday night experience was fantastic. Our Sunday morning small groups, just from a facility standpoint, we didn't really have the opportunity to do a lot with that. But yeah, like figuring out a good way, like whether it's D groups or something like that. Like I really
Hmm.
wish that I had done that a little bit differently, and that students had really responded well. Also, I think that we were on the cusp of having some students really step into some spiritual leadership.
Yeah.
In my time there, I got there and COVID happened 6 months after I got to the church. I really, in some ways, feel like this next season at the church that I'm leaving, which happens to be the guy that I've been talking about that I gave reps to, that was my associate. He's actually taken over,
That's so
and so
cool.
like I think that he's primed for some awesome student leaders that
Hmm.
are entering the 10th grade this year. Really love the idea of giving students reps and like
Hmm.
really challenging them to lead in ministry. Just haven't felt like I've had the dudes uh,
Yeah.
ready or willing to step up until like honestly like these next couple years are going to be the awesome student leaders, Lord willing. Um, and then just like really involving a lot of volunteers. I didn't have a good volunteer, but I had great volunteers. I didn't have great spots for them. I was figuring that
Hmm.
out. Um, we didn't really have I had a need for more Sunday morning small group teachers,
Yeah.
but didn't have the facilities for it. Um, like, and so I really was looking at, if I was still at Cross Point, I'd be looking at this fall, really recruiting like crazy. A lot of volunteers, figuring out how to lead them well. Um, Something that I always wanted to do that I just never really felt like I got the I never took the steps I needed to, and I didn't
Yeah.
walk into an environment where there were a ton of volunteers when I got there.
Yeah.
Like I was the first full time youth pastor, and there was nothing on the calendar, and so it literally was me. I stepped in like, I've got to build this, and I never built it to what it could be.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably another thing I wish I'd done a little bit differently.
But it sounds like you were able to hand the baton off and not really skip a beat, which is really cool.
I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I think we've had some awesome growth in the student ministry over the last year and a half, and it's because of some of those younger guys that I'm really excited about for the future. We're
Mhm.
just incredible inviters, and we baptized 30 students over the last year.
That's so
We've
cool.
gone from, yeah, and maybe a little bit more than a year, but it's been 30 students in like
Yeah.
a year and a couple months, and it's just been incredible to watch. Double in size over the last year and a half. It's
Yeah.
Wednesday night attendance, and that Jack is the guy's name, is going to continue to be there, and he's been a part of every single step of the way. I think that he's going to bring all kinds of relational capital into the role, and I think it's going to, yeah, I'm gone, but I really think that they're going to miss as little beat as possible.
I got you. That's awesome. Well, that's what we're as student pastors are trying to do. Is what my student pastor told me is you want to work yourself out of a job where you've equipped everybody else to do the job where they don't need you, and
Yeah,
that if you leave, the ministry doesn't take a nosedive. Because
yeah,
if it does, that means it was dependent upon you, and
yep,
you were the one doing everything. And so it sounds like you've done exactly what you were supposed to do. You've trained and equipped your replacement. You can move, and they can just continue on. And so
yeah. Hope so.
that,
Yeah,
that's really cool. That's really cool. Well, so that moves right into my next question perfectly. How did you know it was time to transition out of student ministry? There's some of us were called out of student
yeah.
ministry at 25, and some of us are called out at 65. So, like,
Right,
how
right,
did
right, right.
how did you know, man, this is the time?
Um, yeah, so there's probably a lot involved in that question. I think from early on in my call to ministry, and even some of the like mentors and pastors that the Lord has kind of like, sent into my life, um, affirmed and spoke into me a calling, to lead a church. So like I've always kind of had in the back of my mind that that was where I was going to wind up, but I think I could have been thrilled to be at Cross Point for the next 10 years, doing
Yeah.
student ministry. Like I was not putting my name out there. I was not looking around. Um, and I kind of had arrived a few years ago at the place that I really did not feel like, and I think this was the Lord speaking this into my life. This isn't just me like operating off of feeling,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
was like I weighed out. I had a couple of other churches reach out to me for youth ministry positions, and I
Hmm.
kind of just arrived at in my heart and in my just the way I was processing things. That like I don't think that I'm gonna leave Crosspoint to do youth ministry somewhere else. Like I really just like I don't know if there's anything about that that excites me. And I know we talk about working
Yeah.
together one day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was kind of where I got to. Is like I really like I did not think that was a sure thing necessarily, but like that was
Yeah.
just where I was at. Like I cannot imagine going to another church and trying to do youth ministry somewhere else. Like I
Yeah.
just love my church, love my group, love what the Lord was doing, and so I kind of like got to there. And then probably about 6 months ago, yeah, probably about 6 months, maybe a little bit less than 6 months ago, I had a couple of different big opportunities kind of like come like one in particular, like I was reached out to by a church and it wasn't for a youth ministry position. And in my process of like thinking through that, I was convinced that I wouldn't go to another church to do anything other than like to pastor like the
Hmm.
church.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't long after that Derek, the lead pastor of the main campus here in Clarksville, he called me, and it was like it just felt so different. Like it
Hmm.
was just like this is I don't feel it all the same way. You get those
Yeah.
calls. I know you've got those
Yep.
calls, and it's like you hear them, and it's like some of them, it's like I'm going to weigh this out, and I never never turn anybody down without praying about it,
Yeah.
and considering it. But this one just felt different,
Yeah.
like from the jump. And so I pretty quickly, after a couple of conversations with Derek, I told my senior pastor about it, just to like give him a heads up. I have an awesome relationship with him. Love Wes Register. He is my pastor in Hattiesburg. And so I just kind of brought him into it and invited him to be praying for me, but also just be like, hey, heads up, like this feels really different.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have brought you in if like it was one of
Yeah.
those ones that I hung up from the initial call, and in the back of my mind was like, there ain't no way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Those are how
Absolutely.
some of those conversations go. Um, but yeah, like the Lord just made it really clear that like, man, this is where the timing felt, ordained. The like, had just gotten married, and it feels like a big step.
Mhm.
Getting married is a big deal, but it was also like Kelly, Kelly um, joined me at a church that I was already pretty established in. Even
Mhm.
from when we were dating, and she started coming to Cross Point. And so it was like I had learned how to do ministry by myself here. And so it's really exciting for us. It's just this new adventure of like following in the Lord's calling to go somewhere where all we've got is each other, and like learning to
Yeah.
do ministry together in a new context, and meeting people, and being able to just kind of like be a couple in ministry that relies on one another, and like that's really exciting. Um, and so just a lot of it really felt like it lined up. And so we just kind of went through the process, and the Lord just made it really clear that this is what's next for you. And it was something, like I invited lots of counsel from other people,
Yeah.
and really spent some time praying over. And then the Lord just made it really clear, which gives me a lot of confidence coming here because I don't know what I'm doing. But it's like, man, Lord, if you're in it, like I know that I can have every confidence in that.
Well, that's awesome, man. So yeah, that's awesome. Um, I want to go back for just a minute. We talked a little bit about. You said you baptized over 30 kids over about a year span, and so to get to the baptism, there has to be that salvation moment. And
Yeah,
so when you're sharing with a student, like a one-on-one conversation, walking them through the gospel, helping them to determine that this is rededication, this is salvation,
yeah,
whatever it may be. What model do you maybe use as you share the gospel in a one-on-one situation?
yeah, for sure. So I do it the same way every time. And sometimes those students a lot of times they know the Lord's doing something, and
Yeah.
they need your help processing it. And they just feel it in the moment. I've had after Wednesday nights, I've had conversations. At camp, we have a lot of conversations. At fall retreat, we have a lot of conversations.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's always usually like if a student wants to talk to me, it's like, all right, what's going on?
Yeah.
And they may have any number of answers to that. And usually I just get to a point where I'm like, well, hey, listen, like before we go anywhere else, like have you ever responded to the gospel? Sometimes I have no idea what that means. A lot of
Yeah.
times
Yeah.
they do. They've grown up in church or like, and sometimes there's some confusion because I've already been baptized or I got saved at a VBS, and so there's a little bit to
Hmm.
process there. I know you've had those kinds of conversations with
Yeah.
students.
Hmm.
If you're in student ministry and a kid has been in church their whole life, odds are at some point they've made some sort of decision.
For
And a lot of
sure.
times the way I set that up is like, look, let me just to be clear, like I want to. Like, I don't think that you're supposed to be confused about any of this.
Yeah.
Let me just share the gospel with you in a way that just makes a lot of sense to me. And I do that whether a student responds at camp, like they pray the prayer, they look up, they stand up, they walk outside with me.
Yeah.
I usually always am like, well, hey, look, I just want to so that we're on the same page. I just want to share the gospel with you in a way that makes sense to me. And it's kind of a variation of the Romans road is usually what I do. But I kind of set it up on the grounds of like, hey, let's make sure you understand what sin is. All right, if you
Hmm.
can tell me what sin is, um, and sin is any time you do something that outside of what God would want of you. I try to make it real simple, and
Yeah. For sure.
it's like I want you to know a few different things about sin. The first one is that God hates sin, right? And
Mm.
Romans 3:23. I usually talk about the Garden of Eden, Genesis chapter 3. Like God hates sin, and then I usually will tell them here's the bad news. here's the bad news of the Bible, right? Like we're going to get to the good news of the Bible, but the Bible is full of like it's got some sobering news, right? Like in the bad news of the Bible is that you have sinned and that I have sinned, and so here's what that results in. That means that we eternally deserve to be separated from God, and the bad news of the Bible is that because of your sin, someone's got to die, and that someone's going to be you. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. There's no getting around that. Romans 9:22, without the shedding of blood, there can be no forgiveness of sins, right? Like there is no getting around the fact that you personally have sinned, that someone deserves to die, and somebody has to die, and that someone is going to be you. But here's the good news of the gospel. The good news of the gospel is that Jesus is willing to let his death count for you. And like there's no getting around that, right? Like somebody's got to die, and it's either going to be you or it's going to be Jesus. Jesus is willing to let his death count for you. And I make sure they understand like spiritual death versus physical death a little bit. Like that can be kind of confusing. And then like I kind of get to the end, I'm like, listen, so here's that's what the gospel is. Jesus assures us that if we place our trust and faith and hope in him, that his death can count for us. Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. Right? Like, and I just try to like set it all out there. And then I just simply ask students, especially if they've already, quote unquote, been saved. It's like, listen, you responded to something. Did you respond in faith to that? Like, is that what you responded to when you got baptized the last time? Because you've got a lot of confusion right now, right? Like, is that what you responded to? And sometimes they can sit there and they're like, yes, that is what I responded to, and then I can just like really encourage them to rest in that. But other times I've had students tell me that that's not at all what I responded to. Like, nothing about that sounds like my experience, and so I'm able to just kind of walk them through what it looks like to respond. I usually encourage them like, hey, either you can repeat after me a prayer out loud. But what's important about it is not the words that you say; it's the belief in your heart. And I believe that as you repeat them after me, that Jesus, even in this moment, hears and sees and knows you, and that he is the one you're going to be speaking to. And it's important that you believe in your heart that Jesus is who he says he was, and he did what he said he did, and that you give your life to him. And you can either do that, or I love it. I love it. I usually encourage them like, hey, the other option is for you to you just pray, confessing your sins and inviting Jesus to save you. And then you just pray that out loud. Some of the coolest moments were when like students have prayed that out loud.
Yes, I was going to say that.
And I've just got to be there with them, and then like I just pray over them when they say amen. And so that's usually like some rough version of that. Has worked really, really well for me. I think there's tons of ways to go about it. And a lot of times it just depends on what the student has for you. I do think that student pastors are well served to get very, very comfortable in those personal evangelism moments with their students, because you're going to find all kinds of those. And if you can, not that it's about you saying the right things to render salvation on a student, right? Like that's not at all it.
Yeah.
But if you can get very confident in your ability to explain the gospel to a student that might be talking to you one-on-one, I just think the Spirit of God is just going to tee you up, and it's going to be there with you. And I've just had so many. It's just one of the most humbling and encouraging things to have gotten as many opportunities as I have to like, personally lead our students to faith. Like that's the best part of it. I mean, there's and then to get to baptize them, and to just, I don't know. It's special. It makes what we do cooler than what anybody else gets to do. And you just that's one thing that I'm going to miss the most about student ministry.
Yeah.
Is I don't think you get those kinds of opportunities as much anywhere else. Adults don't go to camp. Adults don't go to these cool D-Nows or events, and I think that's a tragedy. I think that's one of the coolest things. I think that's why the statistics show that if a student doesn't give their life to Christ by the time they graduate out of youth group, that it falls off a cliff, the odds of that happening, because in youth ministry, you create space for people to encounter God. And then if you can just be ready to walk them through what it looks like to respond to what God has done, then man, I think that the Lord's going to honor that. And so, but figure out what works for you. 3 circles is great. The Romans road is just like there's no path to telling somebody the gospel that doesn't take you through Romans somehow.
Yeah.
Like just learn the
Mhm.
Romans road. It's so simple, and you can
Yep.
make it work with any conversation you have. And so yeah, that's my method. So it works for me. I just the line, like just leaning into the fact that, man, your personal sin means your personal death if you don't know
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That just line of reason has just like really, I feel like, resonated with students in my ministry, and even like colored the way that I speak on Wednesday nights. And I share the gospel from the stage. It's like, man,
Mhm.
your personal sin means your personal death, but Jesus is willing to let his death count for your personal death. Um,
Yeah. So something I was just going to add on is when a student comes to me and they're wrestling with, they've maybe made a decision in children's ministry or they made a decision before. So I just say, man, hey, there's kind of two big things. One thing is, if you're going to get saved, if you've been saved, there's conviction of sin. If you've given
mhm.
your life to Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit dwelling inside of you. You're convicted of sin. That doesn't mean that I know I'm not supposed to cuss. I shouldn't do that. That's bad. That's
Yeah,
not conviction of sin. That's just head knowledge. You know you're not supposed to do it. You've been told not to do it. You do it anyway. That's not conviction. Conviction is when you do cuss, or when you are watching a movie that you see something bad, or when you have something that you know is a sin, and it just overwhelms you of like, man, I know I'm not supposed to do this. Like,
yeah,
like this is I'm not supposed to be here. I know that I'm not supposed to be. That's conviction of sin. And so walking
yeah.
students through, that's how you know if you're saved. So if you're able to walk in sin and be around dirty jokes and be in group chats where you're bullying people, if you're able to be in that and then not convict you, that's a good sign you probably don't have the Holy
Big
Spirit.
red flag right there. Yeah,
So I'll walk them through
absolutely.
some of that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Like it's so like God is not a God of confusion. Like you don't like, and so many students are so confused about all kinds of different things. It seems
Yeah.
like, and just trying to be like a if the Lord is doing something, like it's obvious. It's just so often like the Lord is clearly doing something, right? Like
Yeah.
if a student comes to you and they're really emotional about something, and like I'm part of the council. We went to camp a few weeks ago with our students, and I actually like had multiple conversations with a girl that was really wrestling with this exact question,
Hmm.
and we talked one night, and she was just in that kind of panicked
Yeah.
state. Where she's like, man, like
Yeah.
I just don't know, I just don't know. I was
Yeah.
like, well, hey, look, let's do this. Like, I want to pray with you, and I want us to just get away from this moment.
Yeah.
Like the worship's fantastic. The Lord's been doing some awesome things, and other people like it is. If you are not sure right now, because I did the whole thing. If you're not sure
Hmm.
right now, that isn't what you responded to when you were younger and you got baptized, then call your mom. She's the one that led you to the Lord. Like, call her,
Hmm.
sleep on it tonight. Let's talk tomorrow morning, and just like get away from this moment, and just try to have the conversation after a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and we were able to talk the next day, and she had talked to her mom, and she felt a lot better. She's like, I know that I responded to the right thing. Like, I know that I responded to that.
Yeah.
Like I know that I gave my life to Jesus, and I know that I understood what you explained to me last night when I did that years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, well, then, hey, you can like. I have every confidence in that. Like, if you can sit here right now and you tell me that, like, I believe you're saved. And
Yeah.
don't stress yourself out about it all the time. You know?
So the thing I tell students too in that exact moment is, let's say the devil has he has a bunch of playbooks, but there's really two playbooks. Right before you get saved, he wants you to think you're good enough. Man, I've done that. I've walked an aisle. I go to church. I read my Bible once a month. Man, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to give my life to Jesus. The second you get saved, man, you're horrible. Do you know what you
Yeah.
did last night? Do you remember those things? There's no way you're going to get saved. And these people are going to look at you when you walk down that aisle like you're crazy.
Yeah.
And that's his playbook. He said, "Well, doesn't want you to give your life to Jesus. You're great. The second you do, man, you didn't mean it. Oh, all this
Yeah.
stuff." I said, so I
Good
help
man.
a student to see that's what Satan's doing. In that moment, that's what Satan was doing to that little girl. Man,
Yeah.
just saying. So just for anybody that's listening, hopefully that this
That's
has
good.
helped you in those moments because we're in camp season. I'm going to camp in 3 days.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's when those moments happen. And I did want, and we don't have time, but I love what you're talking about. And me and Andrew Barber yesterday, he's also transitioned out of student ministry to the adult world, and we had a similar idea of like he said, there's just not as much fun as adults as it is in students. I think
Yeah.
it's because what you just said in student ministry, we create space for God to do big things. And why can't
Mhm.
we do that into adult world? As us guys transition
Mhm.
to adult world, let's not just do what's always been done. create
Let's
space
figure
for
out
God to
how
move.
to do that.
So,
I agree with that 1,000%. Like whatever I can do, like where I'm at right now, like however I can create that kind of space in adults'
mhm.
lives, like even for the ones that are saved, it's just refreshing to the soul,
Yeah.
like to get those mountaintop camp experiences.
Yeah.
That's what sustains you in the valleys, like you got to get to the mountain every now and then. If your
Yeah.
spiritual walk with the Lord is not, you don't remember the last time you felt one of those moments, then you're doing
Mhm.
it wrong. Like
Mhm.
you gotta find a way
Yeah.
in your adult life to have those experiences. Like I think it's part of God's intention for us, as believers, is that he does not want us he doesn't want to feel far off forever, like he
Yeah.
wants us to have those moments where it's just like we break through the clouds, we get a clear glimpse. We can't stay there, but man, when
Yep.
we come down the mountain and propelled onwards in our walk with the Lord by our memory of that mountaintop moment. um,
Mhm.
you can't be
Absolutely.
30 years removed from one of those. Like you can't be. Like
Yeah.
you gotta get back to that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Well, let's go home with this one, Andrew. We talked about, yeah, you've made a shift. You've made a shift into your new job at your last church. Y'all kind of shifted from a traditional D now, and I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of churches are doing this similarly. Yesterday, when I talked to Andrew, um, he was talking about, yeah, their D now is more evangelistic than discipleship, which I feel like that's most of them now. But
Yeah.
but you said you've shifted from a traditional D now to serve ones, is what your event was called. So can you explain kind of what that transition looked like?
Yeah. So it in large part was um, aided by the fact that we brought onto staff a guy that ran a missions camp in the summer for
Okay.
years and years and years before he came on staff with us. And so he had some of the expertise to help us make some of these changes. But what I saw that I wanted to get away from was, yeah, I think D now is a misnomer at this point a little bit. I
Mm,
think that the churches that are doing D now as well lean into the evangelistic side of it. Like that's just,
yeah.
you make it as cheap as possible, you get as many people in there, you get the good speakers, you get the good band, and you share the gospel, and
Mm,
you hope that God like will move in a mighty way. And I think that's how you should do it D now. Anyway, like
yeah.
philosophically, as I think about it. But one of the pillars of our student ministry was that we want our students to serve others, not themselves.
Yeah.
And so, like, just trying to build into our culture as a student ministry a, a culture of service of other people. And so, where we arrived at was that D now wasn't fitting where we were trying to go the way that we'd been doing it forever. And D nows have been going on for 50 years, it seems like.
Mhm,
And the model hasn't changed almost at all,
mhm.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, and so we were like, let's shake it up. Let's change the name and let's lean into the service side of it. A lot of churches will do D nows where they'll do service projects on Saturday morning,
Yeah.
and I think that's awesome. And I was like, I want to move in that direction maybe, but like, why not do more? Let's build the whole thing around us serving our community.
Yeah.
We have camp is very evangelistic. We have fall retreat is very discipleship oriented.
Cool.
Like that's the substance of our fall retreat is it's a discipleship event. But serve one. So what it turned into was we're going to do it when we can start Thursday night, have Friday off, and do all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then send people home. And we want our whole church to be involved. And
Mhm.
so we had multiple different. The structure of it is I would bring in a band, but we did all the speaking in house. So it's like I would
Okay.
speak one of the nights, our lead pastor would speak another one of the nights, and then a pastor from another church that was joining us was going to speak the other night.
Yeah.
And in the mornings during worship, we'd have a Devo time, and we actually got Jack to lead it, who was our my ministry associate this last year, and
Cool.
it's kind of. But so Thursday night, gather together for worship. And we invite all the adults that are going to be a part. All the students come, and I like did find host homes for them, but I tried to like. That's the worst part about D now is host homes.
Yes.
I tried to consolidate as much of that into like big homes as I could. So we actually had all the guys stay at the church. The
Yeah.
girls stayed across the street at a couple different houses. But Thursday or Friday morning, we'd have Devo time, and then we would go from I want to say like 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock. We would
Yeah.
go. We were doing. It's similar to like a mission lab, maybe if you've been to mission
Yeah.
lab in
Yeah.
New Orleans.
Mhm. Yeah. New
Um,
Orleans.
it's like we're doing day camps in communities. We've got a bunch of yard crews running where they're just doing yard work for people. But the way that we set it up is we had a coordinator for our yard groups, and they would just line up the very first house. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's where you're going to start. Like, I've got this house. And then what we encouraged our yard crews to do is like open up your eyes and see the needs in your community around you. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like you encourage students to start looking. You look across the street from the house that you're starting at, and you notice, hey, they've got some their beds are all messed up, in front of their
Mm-hmm.
house. Why don't you go knock on that door and just tell them
Mm-hmm.
why we're out here, and then see if you can serve them by mowing their lawn, taking care of anything, and you start to like bounce around, and you
Mm-hmm.
get students to open their eyes and see. It's like, and not just
Mm-hmm.
students, but our adults. It's like, um, we want you to see that service opportunities are right in front of you if you just learn to
Yeah,
see them and to open your
that's
eyes.
good.
And so it really is. It's bare bones as far as the structure once you get out there. And we've got a guy running around that like, hey, we found out this lady needs the stump removed, and all I've got's a weed eater. You call up the guy that's running the yard crew, and he'll get something out there to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then we had support crews running, and their job was mainly to get the food ready and to take it to the site so that people could eat lunch. But also, it's like, hey, we came across while we were doing a yard crew a family that this family doesn't have any diapers or formula. We're gonna call up support crew, and we're gonna give them their address, and our support crew is gonna run and pick that up, and they're gonna take it to them. They're gonna pray with them. They're gonna share the gospel with them.
Yeah,
And so it's really like this holistic. We're across the city doing all kinds of different things,
that's so cool.
but we're encouraging like a collaboration. And it's like the whole idea behind Serve One is like, if you serve just one person in the name of Jesus, it'll change your life and theirs. And we do a lot more than that. Like, we don't just serve one
Yeah,
person,
for sure.
but
Yeah.
and there's certain people that like it just the environment just makes them come alive. It's like they're the
Mhm.
people that are, Jack, the my youth ministry associate, every year for the last few years at it has had like crazy stories of like finding just people who just were in desperate need, and like
Yeah.
figuring out how to help them.
Yeah.
Like just random things, like somebody's got a mattress that they're trying to get rid of, and they're like, hey, y'all help people out, you want this mattress to give away? Yeah, we'll take it. Throw it on the
Yeah.
back of the truck. And then it's like you come across somebody 30 minutes later. It's like somehow as you're talking to them, you find out they need a mattress. It's like,
Yeah.
you won't believe this, but I got one on the back of my truck right now that I'm trying to get rid of. And like
Yeah.
just stories like that. And so it opens people's eyes to the needs in the community, and it's people over projects every year. It's like we're not
Yeah.
here to mow a lawn; we're here to meet the person behind the lawn.
Mhm.
Create space in your approach to even yard work for you to have conversations with people and to keep your
Yeah.
eye out for needs that need to be met. And when you do that, like it's like dominoes start to fall. And next
Yeah.
thing you know, like the Lord has done something that, man, I showed up here with a lawnmower, and
Mhm.
these people are coming to church on Sunday, and
Yeah.
get saved and baptized. And so it was really just kind of a shift to lean into the service side of it, which service is discipleship. I believe
Yeah.
that. Like
For sure.
and it's so it just that became the event where we really tried to serve our community. And the guy, the pastor that came on that kind of helped it happen, like his whole idea and vision was that, man, I want people in our community to, when they see somebody in need and they see somebody meeting that need, that their automatic assumption is they got to be from Crosspoint.
That's cool.
Like we want to be that kind of church in our community. And so it was just a way for us to move in that direction. And adults love it, our students love it. It's definitely a change. Some of them miss parts of D now, because D now is a fun
Yeah.
event. Um,
Yeah.
and everyone is fun, but it's not near as big on the fun side of it.
For sure.
And it's just like it's one of those things. Just like you can go have fun some other time, some other place. We do fun
Yeah.
stuff as a youth ministry, but
It sounds like the kids that are involved, that you're teaching them how to open their eyes and have eyes like Jesus, and just to
yep,
see the need and see what is around them. And if they can take that model to school,
Mm-hmm.
and just not just walk down the hallways, not just sit in class and just kind of do whatever, but look around intentionally at like, man, this
Absolutely.
person's mom and dad are getting divorced. And so he's struggling. What's something I can maybe do for him? This person's whatever. There's all kinds of situations, but that's I've never heard. People have serve days, so like but like I don't know of anybody that's turned it into an event like this.
Yeah.
That sounds really really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
I'm
is
sure
just how you set it up. Yeah. It's
somebody's
how
gonna rip this. Somebody's gonna rip this from you and be like, "Man, I watched that podcast of that guy Andrew."
oh man, come on.
That's
I think
awesome.
it's time that like we got to figure out new ways to do old things.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like D now crushes it for some people. Like I think y'all do D
Yes.
now. It probably crushes it every year. Y'all could probably get 300 students there. Like it's it's. I think that there is a place for D nows, but I just encourage any youth pastor that listen to me. Like, how do you make the formula better?
hmm
Like even in your approach to D now, like how crazy would it be if we went through a rebrand and refocused our attention in some specific way? How
Yeah.
because I think different is good, especially for things that have been the same way for a long, long time. Serve
hmm
days are great. You can do so much more. Like there's all like always be thinking about like what can we do differently to make it more effective in our purpose and our mission in our reaching our
Yeah.
community. So
Man, Andrew, thank you, man. That's been a lot of really good stuff, and I've just really got to sit back and listen. I'm just going to hear from you, learn from wisdom from you, and so thank you for your time in student ministry. I know you're transitioning out now, but you're going to really get to, I believe, build into your other student pastors, no matter where God takes you. Where you're going to be now, but then in the future, you're going to be able to use all this to help build up the next generation of student pastors. That's
absolutely.
awesome. But if you're listening to this for the very first time and you've not subscribed to Picking Your Brain podcast, man, please do. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. We have a YouTube channel where you can watch the podcast if that's something you're into. I know there's a few people that's asked. We do have every episode up on YouTube, and then we're on Instagram where we have short little clips so you can get a look at each episode. So hopefully we can catch y'all next week.
Yep.